Hey everybody, Nathan Lustig here. Welcome to Crossing Borders, where I interview entrepreneurs doing startups across borders and the people who support them, with a focus on companies that have some relationship to Latin America. My conversation today is with Sebastian Vidal, Executive Director of Parallel 18, an equity-free startup accelerator based in Puerto Rico. Since 2011, Sebastian has worked with over 1,000 startups between his time at Startup Chile and Parallel 18. Originally from Chile, Sebastian worked with Startup Chile all the way from Generation 1 and helped streamline the Startup Chile government to entrepreneur payment process, which I can tell you was a huge pain in the pilot round, before he later took over as managing director. In 2015, he was approached with an opportunity he couldn't pass up, designing an equity-free startup accelerator in Puerto Rico from the ground up, taking everything he learned from his time at Startup Chile. We talk a lot about Parallel 18, why entrepreneurs might want to think about Puerto Rico, and what Seba's learned from his time with thousands of entrepreneurs, and advice to startup founders on what to look for in ideas, co-founders, and more. I visited Parallel 18 as a mentor in June and was really impressed with the quality of entrepreneurs I met there and had a great time. If you're an early stage startup thinking about going to the Latin American market from the US or the US market from Latin America, I'd check out Parallel 18, where they give you $40,000 of equity-free money and acceleration process. Without further ado, my conversation with Sebastian Vidal. Hello, Seba. Welcome to the podcast.
Hello, Nate. Thank you for inviting me.
No, thank you for taking the time to do it. So, where are you in the world today?
So, today I'm in San Juan, Puerto Rico. Moved here a couple of years ago, less than 2 years ago, actually.
And so why are you in Puerto Rico?
So basically, before coming to Puerto Rico, it's probably more interesting than actually why I'm really here. I used to work in a program and actually ended up leading Startup Chile. And I'm sure everyone that's listening know about the Startup Chile, but it's basically a startup or entrepreneurship initiative launched by the government of Chile that essentially wanted to change the entrepreneurial culture of Chile by attracting entrepreneurs from all over the world to Chile to create this change of mindset of the local entrepreneurs to start thinking globally. It's a program that had like a fairly global exposure, you can say. They have attracted more than 1,500 startups so far, and they have created this global awareness all over the world for the same reason. They have attracted so many startups in 6 or 7 years that has made them famous. And I think the other avenue is that it's one really, really good example of how a government can actually do something very, very efficient, non-bureaucratic startup program. It's a good example of how startups can actually work with governments, with their details, but it worked. So I was working on that, and I will say at the end of 2013, beginning of 14, the Startup Chile program became like some sort of best practice pro bono consulting for different governments. So this government could understand like what were the opportunities to create a startup ecosystem all over the world. So we work with Peru, Brazil, Jamaica, Malaysia, South Korea, Lebanon, among others, to be able to understand and help them and support them in the design of new entrepreneurial policies. Right? So one of these countries was Puerto Rico, which I didn't know much about it. And I always said the same thing. So the majority of people that I said Puerto Rico, they said, Costa Rica. No, Costa Rica is completely different from Puerto Rico. So Puerto Rico is a U.S. territory. So if you're born in Puerto Rico, you are a U.S. citizen. Basically, that's the thing. So they approached to me on 2014 and with the idea of creating some sort of Startup Chile in Puerto Rico, but they didn't know really what was exactly what they wanted to build. But I found it interesting. I started to understand a little bit more, and I thought that it was a cool opportunity to be able to actually create something with the learnings that I had in the 5 years that I worked in Startup Chile. I'm convinced that the potential is there in creating global hubs in one specific sector that will have an impact in the economy and the culture as well. So it was a good opportunity to make a shift and a change in something in a place that it was not, startup ecosystem was not quite there at the moment. So that's how I came to Puerto Rico. So they invite me over to create this program from scratch and basically design everything from zero, the name, the brand, the curriculum, mentors, everything from scratch. So it was a huge, huge challenge and opportunity for me. and also for my family. Like it's also for my family in the sense of it was quite challenging to change from a place that I was very happy with, right? So I was super happy in Startup Chile. Startup Chile is an amazing program, great people, great team, great exposure as well. So it was like, why are you going to change? But somehow that's the beauty of, trying to change the status quo a little bit or move out of your comfort zone and just doing things a little bit different and take some risk, right? So at the same day that I took the decision that I wanted to come to Puerto Rico was the same day that the Puerto Rican governor was saying that Puerto Rico was a default. And he was like talking to my boss at that time, Inti Núñez, and Inti told me like, what are you doing? Like, these guys are default. Like, he showed me the news that same day that I remember I was in his office and we were seeing the news, the two of us, and we were laughing about it, and just it was like, yeah, I think they need it the most now, right? But anyways, it was a good conversation. He taught me a lot, and I took it. And I came here August 2015, and I've been here since then.
So let's go back to Chile. So when you first heard about Startup Chile and decided that you wanted to go work there, what job did you apply for, and why were you interested in Startup Chile?
Yeah, so I was interested in startups, and I didn't know the word startups means actually, but I was very interested in creating my own thing. This was beginning of 2010, and I actually partnered up with a couple of friends to create a company, and both of them are working in different startups now. And we did it the wrong way. Like, we started to focus on product, and I was working, so I was not entirely 100% there. So I was part-time because I had my full-time job, and my other partner was part-time as well, and only the program was full-time. It never worked, right? So, but I was curious to understand how I can learn actually how to do this, right? So I would start searching in Google, and basically I found Startup Chile, and I reached out to them and sent them an email. I realized that one of the guys that was leading, it was not the MD at the moment, but Horacio Melo was leading the program at the time. I knew him from college from years. So we had a coffee, and they said that they were looking for a guy that can manage operations. And my whole background was dealing with people and just achieving results through working with teams. So they found that my skill sets and fit that profile at that time. So I entered as a operations manager to deal with all the crap that you deal with in the pilot program in terms of, reimbursement processes and how to deal with how government required some weird stuff to demonstrate what you spend, right? So
yeah, that process was kind of crazy in the pilot round, where we had to justify every meal we had to justify taxi receipts. It was kind of crazy, and now it's way, way better.
Yeah, so it was a huge challenge, and it was not the sexiest challenge, but it was very interesting because you can actually do a lot of stuff if you commit yourself to be more efficient even inside the government. And it's something that I always say when I work and I support and help other governors and government officials and others. It's like when you have the right people and they're willing to make changes and be more efficient, you can change government. So government has a huge bad image of being bureaucratic and slow and efficient. And sometimes that is accurate, right? But I will say that if you really want to change and you're willing to do things differently, you can. So at that time, for people that don't know exactly what we did in Startup Chile by giving money, we gave money to entrepreneurs if the entrepreneur needed to show the invoices first, right? So that's how we started. And now we're giving the money first, and then the entrepreneur need to show the invoices, which is a complete change, right? But that took us a long time to convince the government to do that, and also to make all the reimbursement a little bit smoother. And it's a complete change. Like I don't know, probably in your case, you receive the funds like in the middle of the program probably, or even more. And now you can receive the funds in like 3 weeks and a month.
Yeah, I think
in the majority of the cases.
I think we got our first check in month 4 of a 6-month program, and it was so far along. We were lucky because we had some investment previously, but the executive director, or the managing director of the program at the time, told us, if it doesn't get in from this week, I'll actually give you the money myself, because I know it's going to come, and I know you guys are kind of suffering from not having money for 4 months. But yeah, I mean, it's a huge change to be able to get that money within a couple of weeks of getting to Chile and then reimburse it rather than having to spend it yourself and then present receipts.
Yes. So that's exactly a challenge that why I came in. I actually took it and we built a really, really cool and solid system, and we managed to make it a little bit more efficient. And it was a huge win for us in terms of, that we can definitely make a government process more efficient. That was a huge win. And the other huge win was like the direct benefit for the startups that we are selecting, right? We couldn't allow ourselves to let the entrepreneurs wait any longer. Otherwise, we would have killed the program, right? So it was unsustainable to keep doing that.
What round did you come into the program in?
So I came in when the first generation was 3 months. So at the end of 2010.
And what did it feel like to go into a program with 100 random foreigners from all over the world coming from just a more traditional Chilean background?
I think it's a huge experience. I cannot even, imagine or measure the amount of learnings that I have had in these 7 years working with more than 1,000 startups. It's like, so you have two things, right? The first one is like you work with 300 companies. You don't stop, basically. You overlap with this generation of companies. You never stop. And it's super exhausting because you're always looking different deals, different companies, dealing with different problems with the startups. Not all the founders are amazing guys or, respectful or whatever. When you're dealing with 300, you're going to have some douchebags there or something. And it's a lot of work. And of course, you're exhausted. But that is at the same level that you learn so much and you meet so many amazing entrepreneurs that until today, I'm still in touch with, right? Your network is like, it's endless. It's like I know someone in every single country of the world, I'm sure. And more than knowing someone, I know that person is going to help me because I helped them when they were in Chile. And I think that community of entrepreneurs willing to give, it's exactly what all the entrepreneurial ecosystem needs, right? So I think that was exactly my experience in the beginning of Startup Chile, just like a continuous learning process and then giving what I learned to other generations and more entrepreneurs and more entrepreneurs. And then my role was like, yeah, I could help you, but I'm not an entrepreneur. And I always said that. And I don't care that I'm not. I just play another role in the ecosystem. And I'm totally fine with that. The thing is like, at some point, I could give you advice on what I have learned working with 1,000 companies, but it was more like connecting you. It was like, okay, let's sit down. What do you need? Okay, I'm going to put you in touch with a founder that already passed through that process so you don't make the same mistakes. And it was more like a connector and building, some sort of platform that could help you to grow. So that was my, I will say, revelation when I was in Startup Chile. It's like, okay, I can really help these companies, enabling contacts for them, enabling resources and infrastructure for them, more than just me giving them advice. Even though that I do that now a lot, but I think is a major discovery after working with so many founders for so many countries for these 7 years or something. It was really, really cool.
And Startup Chile had 300 new companies every year for those first few years, right?
Yeah, so it was, it was the first 4 years. It was 300, maximum of 300. I would say like we always have 260, 280 per year. Yeah, it was madness. I think it's fair to say that it works in terms of that something is going to happen. Like if you have 300 or 250 companies a year, positive results will come. Like you're going to have someone acquired, someone is going to partner up with someone in Chile and they're going to create a company, or, all sort of different positive impact side effects that are amazing, right? But at the same time, it's extremely exhausting in terms of operations, right? It's difficult to manage 300 companies. You always are going to not see or not be hands-on with all of the companies. And so you need to figure out a way of trying to scale that. And in our case, was more like, how do we leverage on the community to scale that? So it's like, how do we give power to the community so they can help us teach other entrepreneurs and, help us follow up, help us create a more solid community than us following you all the way because it's impossible with 300 companies. You would need to have like a huge team that it was completely unaffordable at that time. But at the same time, as I mentioned in the beginning, having 300 companies, everything can happen and everything happened, right? And that's a cool thing. It's like the results that you see now are huge. And the results that excite me the most are because everyone, like the first question that they ask is like, yeah, but the economy wise, and even though the numbers in the economy are fine and the ROI for Startup Chile is positive for sure, I'm excited about the cultural change. Like 5 years ago, or more than me, right? You arrived to Chile in 2010 where nothing was there. And now it's like everyone is being an entrepreneur. Like friends from school that I wouldn't even expect it. They are starting their own companies and they all have this global mindset and they all have like technology component. That's huge. You're changing a country towards, an economy that is based on knowledge. And that's amazing. That for me is the most exciting thing. And then, of course, you have in the economy side, like how much money these companies are selling, how much money these companies are raising or they raised if they were acquired. And that's great, but that needs to happen. And we're going to talk about that when we talk about Part 18. But I think that there's another side effect that most of the accelerators all over the world are not measuring, and that's the impact that you have in society. And I think that's the key point.
Yeah, I mean, it really is true that Chile's attitudes towards entrepreneurship, towards having your own business, towards not working for a big company, all that has completely changed. And in addition to that, views on, can I do business outside of Chile? Yes or no? Where should I go next after being successful in Chile? Between that and then also, and I would assume that Startup Chile probably has something to do with this because it raised Chile's profile. There's been a boom in immigration from the US, from Europe, from other countries in Latin America of smart, innovative people that are starting businesses or working in businesses. And I mean, comparing back in 2010, I believe there was a stat that maybe it was from 2008, 2009. It was something like more than 90% of Chileans had never met a foreigner that wasn't Bolivian, Peruvian, or Argentine. And I was the first US person that,
wow.
People outside of sort of the more educated and wealthy areas had met. And now it's common. There's just people from everywhere. And it's been a very interesting change to see.
Yeah, no, I think you're totally right. And that's another good thing of being part of this from the beginning, right? It's like you can actually see those changes or these tangible results in a daily basis or weekly basis or monthly basis. So you're seeing that. It's like people is coming down to work in companies. I remember when we were there were random people coming down just to be a freelance or to give time for free to work with the companies, and they ended up staying and, getting a girlfriend and a polola and just stay there because they like what they saw in their experience. So, and that's what a powerful community brings you, right? And it's another side effect for sure. So it's been a huge change for a very traditional country. You know it from an outsider perspective. So it was a very traditional, and it's still a very traditional country, conservative country as well. But this changed, and I think that it's part of it. So to your first question, it was like, what to do next? That was your first question, or?
So after doing the operations role for a while, you ended up as the managing director. How did that happen, and how did that change your role?
Yeah, so I had like a small transition before that. So after doing operations, like very strong and hard operations, I moved to manage some sort of the acceleration process of the program and like working with more mentors and bringing mentors to the program, connecting more startups to the local ecosystem, and also creating the investor and mentor network internationally. So to bring investors and mentors to the program, engage them more, and just to find the right resources for the entrepreneur. That was my next role, I would say. So I had the opportunity and experience to work with the most, I would say, prominent investor at that time in the US, and mentors, experts in different fields, and also in LATAM and all over the world, actually. And that, blew my mind and opened my eyes in so many different things that I started to learn about all the things like, and how these companies raise money, in what point, the investor scene. I traveled a lot as well, so I understood how this different ecosystem work, how California, how New York work, how, Colombia, how Peru, how, Mexico, whatever it works. So I had like a pretty decent overview of the global panorama of startups, and that makes me have like a more, I'll say, business mindset that helped me to actually ended up leading the program. And of course, I think the support of the guys that were on top of me at that time, Horacio Mero, Jan Bodeger, they were amazing, leaders, and they taught me a lot about how to do this. There's a lot of an operations component in being Startup Chile because you have exactly the same thing happening every 3 months or every 4 months, right? So I think that's a big part of it. And then, it's kind of organic because you already have the connections, the Corfu process, which is the hardest part, the government process, and then you start to know the community, and then, your team. You have international networks as well. You know the entrepreneurs that you're working with. You know the previous entrepreneurs. So you have all the pieces in place, right? And then it happened really organically. And I would say that for sure, it's been the hardest part of my professional life in every sense. Right? It's like leading a very high quality team is challenging as well. 20 to 22 people. They're always very professional, very good. It is challenging as well, but it's also very motivating. And at the same time, all the eyes are on you in the entrepreneurial ecosystem in Chile, and you get a lot of exposure. And these startups, the first person that they're going to point out if something goes wrong is you. So there's a lot of stress around it as well. So it's a very challenging position, but at the same time very hard. But I really enjoy doing it, even if it was like a year and a half or something.
And what were some of the top lessons that you learned from the entrepreneurs that have gone through the program?
Wow, that's a great question. And I think it's something that I'm going to be writing about for sure, because as I told you in the beginning, it's been like a never-ending story in the sense of learning, right? But I would say that you're always going to have your preferred kids, you could say. And of course are the ones that are still working on their company and they're doing well. They did good raise or they got acquired or whatever. And I think that makes me think is like I can see common patterns on why these companies were successful, right? So, or keep growing in the last couple of months. And I think there's many things that I have learned, but the first one I'll say is the focus. So when you ended up talking with people with entrepreneurs that said to you like, this is my product and I want to go there, and at the same time I'm going there, and at the same time I'm going to reaching out to this market, and I'm making this product, but I'm doing R&D in this. And you ask them how much money do you have, and they say like, I don't know, 30K, 50K in the bank account. It's like literally impossible for you guys to do all of this in one time. But I'm sure that you know about this because you invest in startups, but it's amazing how people don't know how money goes away if you don't focus on one specific thing. And it's crazy because sometimes I met with companies that say like, I'm making money with this product, with this segment, but I wanted to, test this other one and test this other one. And they haven't even reached to this point and said like, okay, I'm done with this. I can do this afterwards. And I think part of my learning process is like, and it was part of what I did in Startup Chile as well. And this is like a mea culpa in the sense that I was promoting and fostering this is like the famous competitions and awards that are predominant today in the whole world, right? So, and I think they're not bad. The thing is like, for some companies are not needed anymore because what I realized is that your clients are way more important than a price. So if you can get a client to pay you whatever, 5,000, 5K or 10K a year for a software service, that will worth much more than just raising 25K for like a startup competition in Colombia or whatever. And I think that thought process is challenging, but the entrepreneurs that got it are the ones that are actually very, very successful. So that focus mindset is a common pattern, and it's something that I have learned and that I'm using a lot in Parallel 18 as well. So how do we have focus even though that we have good results? The second one I would say is there's a lot of people that write about not to work hard but work smart and all of these some sort of theories on how many hours do you need to work a week and everything. But what I can say from an outsider perspective and working with the successful companies is the ones that are most successful, raise money, that have been acquired, are like guys that work their ass off. Like you see those guys working all the time, just being connected all the time, and they're always in the zone of working. And it's a huge risk, because at the end of the day, you can spend 2 years in that mode and then your company crash, and it's a huge, personal or psychological, I would say, thing. But I have seen that. So it's like the entrepreneurs that really, really work really hard and smart, and they're always on top of their competitors, and they try and see new things and learn new things to compete and to get better results to their clients, are the ones that are going to win. And you can see that they're on top of it. They always know more than you, and that's how it should be, right? So I think those two things are the most important part that I have learned. The other one is like, I didn't expect to see the effects that a bad team or a bad combination of team can have in the future of your company. So I've seen so many companies fail for the same reason. Just a team that the goals were not aligned. And there's two things there. The first one is like the goals were not aligned, so they want to go different paths, but they don't know how to do it because they didn't set that agreement or that contract in the very beginning. So they didn't set their company properly. So now they kind of stuck on that company and ended up closing, right? So, or doing something different. So the team is something that normally is seen as if you have a strong team, you can lead a startup. And that's true, but there's more than that. So it's like you not only need a strong team, you need a team that is committed with the goals that your company can have. And I think that is something that I have seen also working with mentors like you, for example, and others that we have brought to Parallel Team. It's like I've realized that people, like you said to them, they were like, there's a huge opportunity in the U.S. market, you should take it. And the founder says like, yeah, I totally agree with that. But then a week later, you talk with them, it's like, no, my co-founder don't want to do that. That's fundamental. Like if you want to go to a bigger market and your partner or your co-founders don't want to, that's insane. Like how do you guys are not agree on that? And that's part of, I would say, number one or two of why companies, failed. And that's another learning of founders. And I applied all of those three things to my program as well, which is like kind of my startup now. So I would say those three are the most important ones.
So talking about your startup, Parallel 18, so Startup Chile was doing 3 100-team classes where maybe you'd have 80 or so teams actually come. That would give you, now with the exchange rates, $30,000 of equity-free money and a 6-month visa, office space, and some amount of evaluations, and tell you, hey, let's go to work. And you went to Parallel 18 after having come through Startup Chile basically from the beginning. What kind of changes did you make to the program when starting from scratch in Puerto Rico?
Well, that was, I think, exactly that, right? So the beauty of coming to Puerto Rico was building something from zero. So we create the name, right? So everything was blank, and we created a program that it was mainly based on the learnings, improvements, and just matching what we could do with the Puerto Rican identity and the Puerto Rican culture. And that was fascinating, right? So because you can actually do that, and you have the freedom to do that. And of course, thanks to the government and the Puerto Rico Science, Technology, and Research Trust, which is like the core of Chile. And I think what we did was like, first understanding what was the role of Puerto Rico in the map. Like if you see Puerto Rico in the map, you will say like, okay, this is kind of close to Latin America, kind of close to the U.S., it's like 3 hours away or 2 hours and a half away from Bogota, and 3 hours away from New York. So you literally have something there. Besides that, you have, I would say, the most bilingual country, English, Spanish, in all Latin America and Central America. And also, you have this weird mix of Latin American culture and U.S. infrastructure. So with all those aspects, I said, like, this could work. Like in a startup standpoint, it's a great place to live, great lifestyle, quality of life. The workforce is very sophisticated. You're very close to the U.S., you're close to Latin America, so you can either do biz dev in these both markets. So I think there's something there that we can build into a strong value proposition. So that was the first take. The second one was the reality that Puerto Rico was facing at that time. And I mentioned at the beginning was, one of the hardest, and I would say the hardest crisis, economic and political crisis, where Puerto Rico was facing at the time, and still. And understanding that, it was clear to me that I couldn't do the same that we did in Startup Chile, because the Startup Chile, even though the results were good, the risk is super high, and We couldn't do the same with parallel. So one of the first definitions of parallel is like, even though we want to create that change of mindset in Puerto Rico, our main goal in the beginning was create successful companies and having an economical impact. I will say the change of mission, it was like, we are going to create successful companies, or we are going to create an economical impact. So from that on, we can create a change of mindset. Because the problem in Puerto Rico is that most of the talented engineers are leaving the island, right? So they're U.S. citizens. The worst thing that Puerto Rico has is the U.S. citizens, and the best thing is that they are U.S. citizens. So it's the same thing from both sides. But at the same time, if you ask them right before they leave the island, they will say that they want to stay, but they're not seeing the right opportunities or the interesting or innovative ones to stay. And I think that Parallel team definitely can tap into those opportunities. So the first definition was like, okay, how do we decrease the risk a little bit? Because you cannot decrease the risk on startups. But it's like, okay, let's take less startups. So let's not select 300 to 50 a year, but let's select up to 80. That means that we can select 30. So we can select 60 a year. That's fine. Or less than that if we want. And just select 2 cohorts per year, and let's give us, like a month between each one of them, so we can plan ahead, so we can get strategy, and different thing. And the second one was one that the product needs to be a little bit more developed. So we really need companies that are in a traction mode. The product needs to be in the market, and that definition, we put it in our terms, right? That was the second one. And the third one, it was just creating a more focused, and this comes back to what I learned from entrepreneurs, like a more focused value proposition. It's just saying we are empowering Latin American entrepreneurs and Puerto Rican entrepreneurs, of course, to see the U.S. market in a different way by participating in this program and having a different approach to the U.S. market. So normally how it's been done is like, I'm an Argentinian, I'm a Chilean, a Colombian, and I'm going to Silicon Valley, I'm going to New York directly. And if you don't have the right connections, you basically hit a wall. But what if you have one step before that is closest to the U.S., that it is technically U.S., and you have the same amount of resources that you can find probably in Startup Chile or in other accelerators, but with the best experts that we can bring down from the U.S. in a weekly basis. So that was the second one. And I'll say the third one, which is related to having, between 60 and 80 companies a year, is that we could have a program that is way more focused on accelerating companies. Because one is sort of less companies, so that I, for example, could have a more hands-on approach in these companies. Like in this program, for example, I spend at least 70% of the Mondays I met with all of the companies, at least. And that is something that I couldn't do in Startup Chile if I wanted to. And that's a huge difference because I know what they're struggling with, I know what the challenge is, and I can help them and connect to them. Besides that, because we're close to the U.S., you can allocate a budget that is very decent and is not big to bring mentors and experts and investors in a weekly basis to the program. So we managed to have very good, talented entrepreneurs, investors, mentors, like come here every single week, and they do a talk and then they spend time to our entrepreneurs. For Latin American and Puerto Rican entrepreneurs, that's amazing, right? Because you don't have that kind of access to experts when you are down to Latin America. And that was one of my parts that were most frustrating in the Startup Chile, is like, even though they're very good entrepreneurs and you can find, people that can help you, the right expertise that you need for a company that is growing is not necessarily Latin America. And if you found it in Latin America, it's too busy, right? So I think that the sweet spot is like, how do you connect these guys that already have the experience with these companies in Latin America so they can see the opportunity there? And that mix, you can find it in Parallel Team. And so that's one of our uniqueness, right? So it's like this mix of Latin American startups with experts from the U.S. that give them a different perspective, and then somehow at some point it's like a revelation, right? So
I think the piece about getting the right mentors and the right advice, especially for Latin American entrepreneurs, is really important. I mean, we always say that, or at least I always say, that most of the companies in Latin America that fail are not failing because of a lack of money, even though that's kind of the excuse that gets thrown out a lot. It's that they don't have good enough feedback from people who've done it before. And To be clear, that's the same problem that people face in places like Madison, Wisconsin, where I'm from originally, because it hasn't been the ecosystem yet. So the number one thing that people ask, what can I do to help this? The number one thing is, maybe take an hour every month or every quarter even, and be willing to have a conversation with somebody who's not from the Valley or not from New York. And that's the biggest sort of acceleration that I've seen for startups.
Yeah, no, for sure. And as you said, it's like sometimes it's like we work with companies. So our cohorts are 5 months each, right? So we have 2 cohorts per year, 5 months. So sometimes we work with companies and we never figure out how to help them, or we manage to support them and put them in touch with mentors, and it doesn't seem to work. Like the companies are growing, the growth is flat, and we don't know what to do. And sometimes we bring one mentor, one expert, and that meeting's changed everything. Like he put them in touch with the right people, he gave them the right advice, and everything changes, right? It's a small tweak, one meeting, and it's amazing. So in that case, I would say that's probably a huge value that the program has, and it's related to a huge challenge that Latin American entrepreneurs have, right? To answer your question, I think those 3 things, 4 things are what we design.
And so you just had the 3rd demo day with the 3rd cohort. So that's now around 75 or so companies that have gone through Parallel. What have you learned now after doing your own startup now for 3 cohorts?
What we have learned in terms of demo days, it's interesting because I think demo days in emerging markets are way different than demo days in the US. And I think what happened is like, even if you don't want to, demo days in Latin America, they need to have like an educational component. So if like what happened in Puerto Rico, for example, is like we managed to have good investors in the demo day. We invite investors in that are not necessarily with the right experience, but there's a lot of more people coming down, and there's a learning experience, right? So they see these companies, it's like, wow, these companies are going from Puerto Rico. I really want to do that, right? Or why can they do it and I can't? So there's an educational component. And the other aspect is also a learning process. Like sometimes demo days are not only for raising money, but also for making the right connections for clients, for example. So there's a lot of things that happen in demo days and have happened in Parallel 18 that is related to businesses. So someone that can lead you to a client or just partner up with someone else, or just that's a huge opportunity that you don't see. And it's huge in Latin America as well, because there's a lot of companies that are seeing innovation as a solution, and they're participating in demo days and all these expositions of startups. And they're willing to sit down with you and just chat about what you're doing and probably, creating some sort of alliances and partnerships. So there's a huge opportunity there in demo days. And the third one is talent. When you're pitching your company, you're also pitching your vision. So if you're looking for talent and you have the resources to hire, I think also it's a good opportunity for them to see you and then reach out if you can get really good talent with a good demo day. In our experience, I think in the last 3 demo days that we have had, it's very, very important that I have recently, 2 days ago, I read an article from Mark Suster, a very well-known, it was written in 2010, called Invest in Lines, Not Dots. And it's very interesting because he said, if you met a company once that wants to be invested, probably that's not going to happen. And if it happens, if it's because you have the right connections or the guy invested in a company that you knew or whatever. But normally the investor invests in lines in terms of you met them once and then you met twice and you met them for a year and then probably going to give you money, right? So the relation that you create with the investors that you have in your network are very, very important. So that's what we're trying to do in Parallel as well. It's create an investor network that is solid and is constantly in contact with our companies so they can know the company beforehand, before demo day, right? So demo day is just one event, but the idea is to put them in touch with investors way before that or in another stage or in generations afterwards or whatever. So that's something that we learned. It's not about demo days, it's how your investor community and your startup community is aligned to work together in a more periodically basis. So I think those 2 or 3 points are the ones that we have learned from demo days. We actually secured 2 companies in our generation 2 in the second demo day. We secured investment right on spot for 2 demo days. I don't know if that's going to happen again, probably, hopefully, but it happens. And I think it's also by, choosing the right match, right? And this generation, we still don't know, but hopefully, finger crossed, will happen again. But I think it's a variety of things, but it's like having the right amount of companies, the right quality of the companies, the right investors in. And we have made mistakes. Like we have invited investors that are not looking for this type of deals, or they're just looking for, VC deals, and we're not at that stage. And that's our bet, right? But it's never bad because they always see those companies early on. They're going to have the initial connection. And if it's a good quality deal, they're probably going to come back to their ecosystem, like let's say New York or San Francisco, and they're not going to talk bad about the ecosystem. I'm just going to talk about they still need a little bit more time. So it's positive either ways.
And so what kind of companies should think about applying for Parallel the next time that you open up an application phase?
So now that we're in Generation 4, actually we just selected our fourth batch of companies, 34 companies that are coming in the next couple of weeks. We have more data, qualitative and quantitative data, and that what works and what doesn't work that much. And I would say that companies that are in a sweet spot that, they have, it could be a B2C, it could be a B2B, but they need to be aiming a little bit higher. So in a B2B case, we're really looking for companies that have like 2 to 3 people's team. They're making between 5K to 20K, hopefully growing, but not necessarily. But they're making between those revenue, tech company or tech-enabled company that are looking, could be Latin America, but hopefully that could add value to Puerto Rico or the U.S. And in the B2C case, something that we're not very convinced is like a B2C that is targeting Latin America. Not entirely our focus. It's probably something that a 500 Startups Mexico is more looking at, but we're not at this point. But B2C, Latin American startup, B2C focusing in the U.S. probably is something that we will definitely would like to see. In the hardware phase, we have selected a few, but they need to have a product in the market. Normally, we're not fit because when they have a product in the market, they already raise around. But there's still some companies that are in that sweet spot that they haven't raised money, they have a product in the market. Well, that could work. So if you're a Latin American entrepreneur, you know that you have a cool product, you're making between 5K and 25K, and you think that you could have an opportunity in the U.S. through Puerto Rico, I think that's our best sweet spot. And I think our most successful cases are from Puerto Rico and also from LATAM, specifically Argentina. Argentina, Mexico, let's say, are the ones that I could highlight. So I think that will be our focus, understanding the 4 generations that we have had.
And what advice would you give yourself if you could go back to when you were starting Parallel, knowing what you know now? What would you tell yourself?
I would probably do a strong focus on LATAM. I think at the beginning, and I think this happened because you're trying to not show that, because you want the companies to come to you, right? So you try not to say something that could eventually make a company say, no, I'm not coming to Puerto Rico. So I'll say at the beginning, I'll focus way more our promotion in LATAM, maybe Spain a little bit more, LATAM, Spain, Puerto Rico, LATAM, Spain, Puerto Rico, and that's it. And do like a business tours in South America way more intensive and stronger, because I have seen that the entrepreneurs there are like amazingly talented and they have like a different drive in terms of growing their companies. So I think that I will do that for sure. Just being a little bit more focused in terms of verticals as well. The things that I just mentioned, I would love to have the chance to do that at the beginning. Also the investment side, I think you need to allocate some sort of time to support investment communities, investment angel networks in the startup community, to help create one or to create one yourself. I don't know. We invest in our companies as well, so we don't necessarily, but we give equity-free funding, but we also invest in a maximum of 3 companies per cohort, up to 75K. And that's game-changing, right? Because it's like you are basically creating an investment vehicle that is going to incentivize local investors to put money or global investors to put money in the local economy. But I think it should be more. So I think if nothing's there, like you were mentioning Wisconsin, Angel Network's not built there, I will encourage you to do that in parallel to the program that you're building, because it's super extremely important. You will define if the companies can grow from the region that you're working with. That success is going to be shared by these local investors. it's amazing the benefits that could have to create this some sort of stronger investment ecosystem. And this is something that we're working on now, like a group, and we're connecting with the right people to do it. But we should do it way before. And I will definitely do it if I have the opportunity to start again. So those are the main things. And also, which is related to the main challenge that creating a new program in a major startup ecosystem is, how do you make sure that the minor leagues are prepared to programs like Parallel 18? Like, how to make sure that the pipeline is there in the country that you're working with, right? So I would say that's the most relevant part. And for that last goal is you need to create like a amazing relation with universities, local universities, that normally are the ones that are constantly graduating talent. They can help you create like local incubators and all that stuff. And also local large corporations. So that's another great point. Is like, you need to involve large corporations of your country or city or whatever to this type of programs, because they're going to inject money, funding, but also deals, right? So one thing that has worked really, really good in Parallel is like we have like 15 to 20 companies, large corporations here that are eager to see more startups coming, and amazing things have happened. It's like, because we have had that connection with them, we create like a sub-program inside Parallel 18 called P18 Connect. And we basically connect in a very organic way big companies in Puerto Rico with small startups. And we ask them just one thing. It's like, we don't give them money. We don't ask for money. It's very organic relation. But the only thing that we ask for is like, the CEO needs to be in the table for that meeting. So we prepare our companies, but the CEO needs to be in the table. And that's been amazing, because most of these countries are ruled by, 15 to 20 families, and most of the Latin American countries as well. So if you somehow are able to reach out to those families or those companies, you can create a whole different ecosystem. And amazing things have happened in that sense. Like, one company or two companies have invested in our startups when they were not investing before. They're becoming clients of our startups as well. And I think that's huge, because it levels up the local economy, right? The competitiveness of the local economy.
So where can people find more information about Parallel 18 or connect with you in order to ask you questions about the program or what you've learned?
Well, I'm always this is part of my job, so I always give my email to anyone, to Sebastian@parallel18.com. If you want to reach out to know more like standard information about the application process and the specific resources that we have, you can reach out to our website, parallel18.com, or our info, which is kobe@parallel18.com. And if you want to learn a little bit more about us and the mentors that we have, we broadcast talks every Wednesday through our Facebook Live page. Every Wednesday, 10:30 EST, you can see our mentors in a talk. So you can learn a little bit more about the quality of our mentors, how the program works, and all of that. So those are the main channels, and we will be more than happy to assist you and connect.
Well, thanks again for taking the time to have this conversation with me. Really appreciate it. I hope to be able to come to Parallel again for the 4th cohort.
No, thank you, Nate. We've had a great time, and I think the entrepreneurs were very grateful to have you here. So I'm sure that we're going to see each other again in San Juan.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, and have a good rest of your day.
Thank you, Nate. Take care.
I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Sebastian Vidal from Parallel 18. If you did, please check us out and subscribe on iTunes and Stitcher, or on my website, nathanlustig.com. And if you really, really enjoyed it, which I hope you did, please give us a rating. That helps other people find the podcast and share more stories from Latin America. Thanks.